So welcome back. We've completed studying the Nefesh HaChaim, and what we're going to do now is study what's called Mamer HaTzelem, and it was written by Rabbi Yitzchak Volozhin, the son of Reb Chaim Volozhin. He's the one that actually published the Nefesh HaChaim. Reb Chaim Volozhin commanded his son to publish the manuscript, but he did not publish it in his lifetime. So Rabbi Yitzchak Volozhin writes a Hakdama to the Nefesh HaChaim, which we've seen, and he talks about how great his father was and his diligence and his service and shimush to the Vilna Gaon. And the translator writes here that in the 1824 first edition and all subsequent editions until roughly 1989, this annotation called Maimer HaTzelem is printed alongside the text of Gate 1. And it's true when you open the old style Nefesh HaChaim, you can't tell what's the text and what's the notation. It's confusing and strange. Only later was it broken out of the text and placed between Gates 1 and 2. And we're going to take a look tonight at a little bit of commentary from Frankel, who does a beautiful job with his notations and explanations. And he writes that it's wise to learn the Maimer Etzelem after concluding learning the entirety of Nefesh HaChaim, because it's actually more advanced Kabbalah. Good evening, Steve. Welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Hi.
So I'm just reintroducing the Maimer Etzelem by Yitzele Volozhin. And I think I'm ready now to jump in. We had begun it, but I'm gonna review the basic idea that he said in the very beginning. And he's addressing Inyan HaTzelem, which of course God created man, but Tzelem Elokim. And that is the topic of the beginning of the Nefesh HaChaim. But Rabbi Yitzele Volozhin brings the Arizal, Shechil Gama Arizal Legimel Bechinois, Tzadik Lamed Mem, which of course spells Tzelem, but we're, dissecting it. We're analyzing it into its component parts. And he goes to, I'm going to say three parallel, I'll call it universes, but three parallel planes. One is the Daled Yesoidos, okay? The four Yesoidos of fire, wind, water, and I would call it earth. Not dust. I don't like dust. So there's four Yesoidos, Eish, Ruach, Mayim, and Afar. Okay? And he says, okay, the main three active ones are Eish, Ruach, and Mayim, and they really act on the earth. Okay? But the earth like doesn't move, it's sort of inert. The movement comes from the fire and the water and the wind. In the Sefer Yetzirah, there are three letters that are called mothers. And I mentioned there's different groups of letters. There's the mothers, there's the kfulois, beged kaporet, and there's the pshutos, the regular letters. So these three mothers are Aleph, Mem, and Shin. And they correspond to these three of the Asoidos, the Mem for Mayim, Shin for Aish, and Aleph for Avir. And then he goes into the letters of Yud Ke Vav Ke. Behem Gimel Oisiois, Yud and Hey and Vav of the Shem Baruch Hu. And of course, the letter Hey is doubled in the Shem Hashem. And so the last Hey, we might say, is representative of Earth. And might even say Mother Earth. And that's called the Malchus. And everything is going to act upon it. But the first three letters are going to be the forces, the Yesoidos, and the emos and forces that are making things happen. Okay, and then after he's given us that sort of three planes and the correspondence, he explains now how that fits into the letters of Tselem. And it's a little bit confusing. So I would like to read it from Rabbi Frankel, who explains it really beautifully. That Well, let me tell you, he quotes a little bit from the Sefer Yetzirah here, which is good. Um, he made the letter Aleph king over the wind. He bound a crown to it, and he combined them with one another. And with them he formed air in the universe, and the temperate in the year, the chest and the soul, the male, with mem before shin, indicating dominance. Okay, that's above us. He made the letter mem king over the water, and he made the letter shin king over fire. He bound a crown to it, and he combined them with one another. And with them he formed heaven and the universe, and heat and the year, and the head and the soul, and so forth. Okay. So, but what we're looking at now is how this captures the Tselem, Tzadik, which is 90, Lamed, which is 30, and Mem, which is 40. And 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 multiplying by the number 10 is intuitive for us as students of Kabbalah, even novices, because we know there's 10 spheroids. And so to take these three letters of Yud Ke Vav Ke, or these three emot of the letters Aleph Mem Shin, or the three Yesodot, and say three is really 30, okay? Because 3 times 10 is 30. So that's basically, those are the three active Yesodot, and each one of them contains within it, I'll read again Rabbi Frankel, all world levels in spheroid can be generally subdivided into sets of sub-spherot. Therefore, each of the four levels of Yud Ke Vav Ke have 10 spherot, forming 40 in total, which is the numerical value of a mem, as per the quotation from Eitz Chaim. So the mem corresponds to the yud of Yud Ke Vav Ke and represents Chokhmah. Okay, so the mem, we have four letters, and each of them contains 10 different levels, 10 spheros. 4 times 10 is 40. We've justified the mem of Tzelem. We're working, excuse me, we're working now on the Lamed. And it says that the three active elements are represented by the Lamed of Tzelem, and they are still on the level of three intellects. So here's the note from Rabbi Frankel. The intellect represents the three combined levels of Chokhmah, Bina, and Da'at, which we're familiar with. Chokhmah is like knowing stuff, data. Bina is analysis of data. And Da'at is like forming conclusions, making a plan. Okay? So Chokhmah, Bina, and Das is a three-part cognitive process where the initial wisdom Chokhmah is expanded and analyzed through the process of understanding Bina, with the union of wisdom and understanding forming knowledge, Da'at. The Da'at goes on to express itself as the six midot. Okay, the next step is that there are six midot, and that's Chesed, Gvura, Tiferet, Netzach, Hod, Yisod. Those six. So the three that we had, 3 times 10 is 30, we've justified the Lamed. But now that we go into the six midot, Chesed, Gvura, Tiferet, and then Netzach, Hod, Yisod, that takes us all the way down to 9. 3 plus 6 equaled 9, and 9 times 10 is 90. So that's the tzaddik of Tzelem, i.e., the tzaddik which represents the three parts of intellect, extending into the midot, forming three lots of three, i.e., 9, which are three levels of intellect, plus the six midot, with each of which having 10 sublevels, totaling 90, which is the numerical value of tzaddik. So I feel have said it over clearer and myself have internalized it more, how Rabbi Volozhin has presented the Tselem Elokim of Tzaddik Lamed Mem and had it corresponding to the three active of the Daled Yesodot, 3 and 3 times 10 is 30, that's Lamed. There are actually 4 Yesodot, like there are 4 letters in the Shem Hashem. And when he went from the three, the Chochmah, Bina, and Das, let's say in the spherois, and then he added the 6 midos to them, so he had 9, and 9 times 10 is 90, so he's justified the tzaddik. So that, Vehu tzaddik Tzelem. So we've reached this paragraph of the Maimer B'Tzelem, and I would like now to continue on.
What
Okay,
does seichel connect to of those three, or doesn't it?
that's that's a good question. The word we have the word maskilin and the word maskil. Seichel we use as like a Yiddish word, but it's for sure it does have it's a biblical word, sechel and
Intellect,
lahaskil.
intellect.
I'm not sure actually. You stumped me to a little bit because I'm really familiar with Chochmah and Bina and Das. And so what does it mean lahaskil and muskal? I think it's sort of a general cognition and realization, like learning something. But I'm going to take that as homework and try to do more research on where does sechel fit into Chochmah, Bina, and Das. Okay, so I like the
It's not.
question.
Um, I mean, it's not like outside the Torah frame, right? It's not like
No,
secular knowledge.
no,
Oh,
I
yeah.
mean it says that David HaMelech was maskil b'kol drachav.
Mhm.
So we have to understand the usage. So I'm
We have
gonna
that term in davening. We have that term in davening. Um, just popped out of my head. I'm gonna ulaskil. Is
Lilmod lamed, lishma v'lasset,
yeah,
lahaskil.
yeah,
Good.
ulaskil.
Yes. So maybe like to intellectually countenance something or so Leonardo, I'll look into that.
Okay,
Okay.
thanks.
So we're ready to move on in the text here of the Ma'amar B'Tselem. And so he now introduced a passage of the Zohar. Ayin B'Zohar. What's it say? It says, Daha kuchabrichu kidabara alma avidle lebarnash b'diukna delay v'iskinle b'tikunei. When the Kadosh Baruch Hu created the world, he made man based on, he wrote Selem here, but it says here, b'diukna binei. Diukna is actually like a portrait. I would have said image. The right word is image, is a better translation, which is the fundamental statement that God created man in his own image, in the divine image, which is indisputable, though it's also difficult to really explain what that means. What does it mean that man is created in the image of God? But he created man in his image and rectified him with rectifications. That's a difficult thing to translate. Atkin le betikunoi. Again, litaken is to rectify. So I understand why Rabbi Frankel and also this Leonard Moskowitz, they both translated as rectified. Okay. And then it says, Amar Reb Shimon, come look. There are four primary components. Arba inun kadamoy, raza de hemnusa, ve'inun avan de kulu almin, ve'raza de reticha ila kadisha. There are four primary components in the secret of faith, and they are the fathers of all the worlds, and the secret of the Merkava. This word reticha is the Merkava. Okay, the supernal Merkava. What are they? The inun eish ruach mayim afar. So here's a passage in Zohar which is addressing something that we recognize as being ancient and medieval science, namely that there are four yesodot, there are four primary elements. Today we have a periodic table, we have 106 and so forth, but it doesn't mean that it's wrong to examine the world according to an intellectual paradigm that it has in it only four elements. And so for sure Chazal used that paradigm, and here it is in the Zohar HaKadosh. Okay. And it goes further. Ve'ilein inun raza ilah. It says there's something really niskav, something important about this. Ve'ilein inun aven dekudul almin. Techazi ilin kadmoin v'sharshin de'ele v'satoin ve'ilin alayu kaimin ve'ilin inun dalid the dalid sitre alma. They're the four elements. They form the supernal secret. They are the fathers of the world. Come see fire, wind, water, earth. These are the primary roots above, and they form the basis of existence of the lower and supernal realms. These four correspond to the four corners of the world. Okay, Ledalad Kanfei Saaretz, Sitre Alma, the 4 points on the compass. And then it says, Afar Ihu Karve Yavesh. The Sefer Yetzirah examines the Dalad Yesoidos, and it characterizes them according to whether they're wet or dry, hot or cold. And so fire is obviously hot and dry, and water is obviously wet and it's considered cold, and steam is, avir is in the middle, but afar is cold and dry. Okay, again, this is medieval, this ancient science. This is Aristotle basically, and so it's ancient, an ancient paradigm.
They also
Velda,
probably, they also
yes,
probably, medieval thought or whatever, they may have thought that Arbor Confer Haaretz or whatever was a hint that the world was flat.
I'm
I've
not
heard
sure.
that. I've heard I've heard things explained that it's not so simple from the Tanakh, that there are hints that would lead people to believe at some point that the sun went around the earth and that the earth wasn't necessarily round. Maybe this is one of those things.
Okay, I'll for sure grant you geocentricity as opposed to heliocentric solar system. The flatness or roundness of the Earth, I'll leave. But
Yeah, that's a
okay,
hard one.
yeah. So anyway, we're quoting from the Zohar that Afar ihu karvi avesh, velda mikabel ale kulu. Again, I use the word inert or sort of passive. The Earth is cold and dry. You can do stuff to it. So the water and the fire and the movement of air all affect the earth. V'kulu avdi bei avidate, umekabla mikulu la'afka bechelehon. And so the earth is cold and dry, and for that reason it receives upon itself all the other three Yisoidos, and all of them act through it, and it receives from them all the others so as to express via their power. Okay? That's a nice description of like everything we do to matter. We do to essentially earth and to we make stuff out of different materials, but they're like from the earth, like wood is trees that grow from the earth. Okay, and it's vegetative, so it has some water in it, and it has some fire, even the photosynthesis, right? But essentially, we're working. Things are happening through fire, water, and air onto the earth, and there's a parallel here to the second hey, the last letter of the Shem Yud Ke Vav Ke, which is like a container for all the previous three letters. The Yud, K, and the Vav are like contained in the final Hey of the Shem. I'll give you an example of that. We say in Ashrei, Malchutcha Malchut Kol Olamim. Okay? The Malchus, which is the tenth of the ten spheroids, the last one, is expressed in the second Hey of Yud Ke Vav Ke. Okay, that's the Malchus. And when we say Malchus, think of a kingdom. Okay, we know about Disney, the Magic Kingdom. And what do you have there? The answer is everything. Everything is in the kingdom. Because the kingdom, of course, has a king and his crown and a palace, but it also has, besides ministers and ladies, dukes and duchesses, and horses and horsemen, but there's also criminals and dungeons and all sorts of bad characters as well as good characters. But the Malchus contains everything. Okay? So Malchus is like a container for everything. And so that last, and think of the letter Hey as a container, right? It's open, it has some boundaries, but there's all this open space in the middle of the letter Hey. And so that space, which is really created by Vavs. This is really a Vav, and this is Vav, and this is really a Vav. So there's really three Vavs here, potentially. And within those three Vavs, there's this space, which is like feminine space. And within that feminine space, you have Mother Nature. You have the earth upon which everything acts. I'll give you another expression of that. When Esther Amalka would go to Achashverosh in order and essentially offer her body to him, um, she's not guilty of engaging in forbidden marital relations because the Gemara says she's karka oilam. She's like passive. She's just like Mother Earth. Like when you plant a seed in Mother Earth, so Mother Earth is receptive to the seed, like a man plants a seed in his wife and she grows it into a child. So, like Mother Earth accepts a seed and grows it into a tree or whatever. And so it's talking about sort of the passivity of the female in that act particularly. And so I'm going back to the letter Hey, which is this feminine letter. And so it's the mother and the outline, the kingdom that contains everything within it. Remember, the Gemara Reb Yossi says, I never call my wife, I call my wife my house. Lo olam lo karasi le ishti and le ishti beisi. My wife is my world. She's my home. She's my house. She's my world. Okay? That's the
Don't we
role of
have
the
that? I'm
feminine.
sorry, don't we have a similar reference to Ohel?
Hanashim asher ba'ohel. Tivarech ya'el min nashim ba'ohel. Beautiful, Shimon. Yes. Then again, it's a feminine symbolism of space. You take a tarp and you put it over stuff and you create space, an ohel. And that, I mean, I remind you, I was shocked when I first learned this. The Hebrew word for the female is nekeva. And I just thought, wow, because a nekev is a hole, and so
Opening,
the
an
Hebrew
opening.
word for the female is the one with the orifices. She has orifices, and that's actually explicit in the Sefer HaBahir. That description of the word nekeva as referring to her capacity, essentially, to bear children, right through her uterus and everything. It's like negative space that it can fill up, and a child can develop and come from there. So that's what the Nekeva is about. So the letter Hey is a Nekeva, and it's like Mother Earth, and it's receptive. It receives from all the others so as to express via their power. Again, that's like a female trait. She's accepting the strength of her man and then bringing something to fruition. So that's like we can see sort of motion and energy being transferred through the Shem Havaya from the teeny yud, like this spark of life, of energy, is being transferred into the hay, and the hay is connecting to the final hay, which is the malchus, which is malchus chamalchus koiloi lamim. This is the space of the universe where everything is taking place. Okay, so more. V'hu kenal she'ikara poalim ba'olam u'banefesh. The main actors, the essential active ones in the world and in the soul, Hem Gimel Yesodot Eish Ruach Mayim. It's three of the four. Val Yedei Yesod HaAfar Nigla Koyach Peulot HaGimel Yesodim Ba'olam. And then the fourth one, the upper, is what brings that into reality. V'chein Benefesh Nigla Al Yedei Guf HaAdam. The same thing is true of the human being, that what gives us energy to move and do? It's spiritual stuff, but ultimately it's our body which moves and expresses the energy. Our body, of course, is me'afer atav el afer tashuv. Our body is from dust to dust, right? So, b'chein benefesh niglal yedei koach adam, she is sodomi afar. Be'ulat koach hagimel yesodot, avir ruach mayim, eish ruach mayim. שבנפש, כמבואר בזוהר הנ"ל, וכולו אבידי בי אבידתי, להפקה בחילehon. And all of them act through it so as to express via their power. וכנראה בחוש, this is empirically perceived by the senses. שהארץ מוציאה צמחים, as I explained, you plant a seed and it sprouts from the earth. Mehem toldot esh. Um, he gives good notes here, Rabbi Frankel. What comes from the fire? I'll just say like sunflower seeds, things that grow from in a hot desert or something like that. Ke'inyan mimaged tivois shamesh. with the bounty of the sun's crops. And there are some things that come from Toldos Amayim. I would say algae, right? Algae is a vegetative, it's a plant that grows in the water. Umehem Toldos Amayim, Lachim Vikarim, Ke'inyan Mumeged Gerish Yirachim. And some of them are the effects of the waters, both moist and cold, as in the context with the bounty of the moon's yield. Umihem toldot ruach, and some of them they are effects of the wind, as in the context ke'inyan me'avira karabu, like mushrooms that grow from spores. Zika de basar mitra kemitra, shimsha de basar mitra kitre mitri. Yeah, so again, he's quoting from the Gemara about the impact, excuse me, of
Good.
wind and sun. Kiyadua sheteva ha'esh ve'aruach lehagbia of. As it is known, it's the nature of fire and wind to fly upwards, whereas water flows to a lower place. Umayim yordim lamakom namuch le'afar. V'im gam yisod ruach ve'esh miskashrim b'yisod amayim. Heim anoisnim shepam v'nimshachim la'aretz. Az mizgale al yedei yisod afar. Kol atzmachim be'itmazgut kol hagimel yisodot kara'oi. So we could begin to understand the this ancient model of nature, of the interweaving of the fire, the wind, and the water acting upon the earth that brings us all the varieties of vegetation and ultimately even of the animal kingdom that are revealed when all three elements combine appropriately. Okay, I think I'm gonna call it a night there because as you see, I'm not feeling great, and we learned something beautiful and important. And it's we say Adam Yesoido me afar. We're gonna say that on Yom Kippur. Adam Yesoido me afar v'soifoi le'afar, and ultimately will be buried in the earth. Benafsho yavilachmo. We use our soul to try to work and feed ourselves, and we struggle. And we struggle to be righteous and good people. Hashem should help us to be inscribed in the book of life. Give us mechila slicha v'kapara, lanu kol b'nei Yisrael. Thank you, gentlemen, very much for being here. Looking forward to seeing you in the future, where we'll continue. Kol tov.
Feel better.
Thank you.
Marchatima
Good night.
tova.